Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Govs on the Go, Alumni Edition, a podcast featuring alumni from the College of Arts and Letters here at Austin Peay State University. My name is Dr. Buzz Hoon. I'm the dean of the college. I'm also the host of the podcast. And today I'm talking with a very special guest, Joe Giles, who graduated from Austin Peay in 1961 with a BA in education with a music concentration, and again in 1972 with a master's degree. Joe, thank you for being on the podcast, and so good to talk with you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
A two-time graduate. You don't get all that.
Yes,
well, not only one, but two degrees, and that makes you. And we have so much to cover in today's podcast. It's just a lot that you have such a wonderful career that we're going to explore. But let's tell everybody what's going on in your life right now.
Well, I'm very happily retired, though it took me a while to get into the habit of being retired. So after I retired from my last full-time job, I did several part-time jobs. And for the last 5 or 7 years, I've done mainly what I wanted to do, including writing a book of family history.
Oh, nice, very nice. And you're still here in Tennessee?
Yes, I'm in Nashville.
Okay. Well, we're gonna explore your early part of your life. Let's go back to, you told me that you grew up in Clarksville. And you had a very early connection to Austin Peay, even when you're in your education. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Because I went to elementary school at the Austin Peay Demonstration School, music teachers from the Austin Peay Music Department came to that school and taught us. And Charles Gary, who went on to be the executive director of the Music Educators National Conference and a faculty member at Catholic University in Washington, was one of my very first music teachers. And my first band director was Lou Bodine, who was an incredibly sensitive and helpful and inspiring teacher for young people. Several times I decided I was going to quit band, and he would go and talk to my dad, and they would decide that I wasn't. So I'm grateful for those interventions.
And it's you must have had a connection with music very early on, and what was that? What was that like, Joe? Was it singing? Was it playing instruments? Just a general love that it seemed to be within your spirit?
It came from my mother and her side of the family. They all played instruments, none of them professionally trained, but they had an innate ability to pick up an instrument and learn to make music on it. In doing my family research, I ran across a newspaper article in which there had been a fiddler's contest in Clarksville. And the first prize winner was my mother's uncle. And the second prize winner was another uncle. And the third prize winner was her uncle from the other side of the family. So, my mother was a good church choir alto, and she played piano by ear. And so music was just always a part of it. My dad liked listening to music, but that was it. He didn't like doing it, or didn't have the opportunity ever to do it.
But they were very supportive of you.
Oh, absolutely. Started piano lessons at age 7 and started trumpet at age 9. And Mr. Bodine switched me to baritone because he needed a baritone in the band. And then later at Austin Peay, actually, I played French horn.
So if there was a need, occasionally you were stuck in that, huh?
Yes.
Well, let's talk about in high school. You had mentioned that you were one of those. Even though you're in that demonstration school, you got in one of those situations where you got advanced a couple grades ahead of time.
Uh, from the 7th grade to the 9th grade, and I stand in disapproval of that process. uh, I think that I was too immature as a 7th grader to suddenly become a 9th grader. That's a pretty big jump at that point
Yeah.
in one. And so adjusting to high school was a little difficult for me, but I had teachers at Clarksville High School who made all the difference in the world. I could name several people, but I'd like to mention by name 3, if I may.
Yeah.
Theater and speech teacher named Barbara Darnell Cullen, who also was an Austin Peay graduate. And she perceived that my sort of shyness needed to be brought out. And I told her later that she started me by having me do a demonstration speech. And I did a demonstration of how a metronome works. And she liked it and she encouraged me. And I started coming out of my shyness. And I told her later, you started me talking, and I haven't stopped since. In addition to Barbara, my high school choral director was also wonderful. LaRue Pryor was her name, and her husband was head of education at Austin Peay at the time, Dr. Harold Pryor. And she encouraged me further. And I always remember her. And when she passed away, I drove through an ice storm to get to Columbia, Tennessee to attend her funeral because she was significant in my life.
Wow.
And the third one that I always mention was at Clarksville High to be the French teacher. But one year they had one class of English left over, and she had one period in the day left over. So the two came together. And in that English class, things began to fall into place that had never fallen into place in exactly that way to me. She fully believed in the now outmoded practice of memorization. We memorized a poem every week. And on Friday, when we went in, our desks were cleared. We had a clean sheet of paper and a pencil, and we wrote the poem for her. I wasn't enthusiastic about it at the time, but since then, I have been more than enthusiastic. As a matter of fact, I asked her to speak at a program one time. Did I say her name? Dorothy Ann Ross Russo. And we remained friends throughout her life.
That'll be.
But she was reluctant to accept my invitation to speak at this conference. She said, well, whatever would I say? 50 minutes, you say? Well, I could not possibly do 50 minutes. But she eventually agreed to do it. And so, knowing that she was concerned about the time, as I introduced her, I included a poem that I still remembered that I had learned in her class. And she got back to Clarksville, and a good friend of hers said, well, how did it go? And she said, well, it went fine. It would have gone better if Joe hadn't used so much of my time in the introduction. She was a wonderful lady, a wonderful teacher, and I'm so lucky to have had these people. And these are just three that I picked.
Sure.
There were others also.
Well, that's, what's wonderful about that, Joe, is it makes me think, do you think that those wonderful experiences of people that were influencing you early like that maybe helped direct you into the field of education?
Without a doubt, that's true. When I got to Austin Peay, I was not sure what I was going to do. And a new band director named Aaron Schmidt, when I joined the band, said, since you're undecided, why don't you go ahead and declare a major in music? And then if you change your mind later, you can do it. Well, as you know, when you declare a major in one of the art forms, it's hard to break away and do other things. So I remained a music major.
So you mentioned you were in the marching band, and yes. I'm sure you were involved in lots of other things, but I think let's stay there just for a moment, because you had a unique experience. You get to march in the Macy's Day Thanksgiving Parade. Is that right?
Exactly right. That same band director, Dr. Aaron Schmidt, was determined to get the Austin Peay Band in front of as many people as possible. And I don't know what techniques or persuasions he used to cause that to happen, but he did get us a slot there. And of course, we auditioned, sent a tape and all of that. And we took a train from Clarksville to New York, because that was the year 1960. And we had a tremendous time. It was cold, and we complained about the cold in the marching, but we all loved it. And we were one of the bands that got to stop in front of the Macy's store and be on TV for a more extensive time than just walking past the cameras. So it was inspiring in that way. Also, I got to see my first Broadway show. It was Gypsy, starring Ethel Merman. Wow. She was able to belt the songs out so that you really didn't need a ticket to hear the show. It was a terrific experience that I always still remember with a lot of pleasure.
No, that's awesome. And we try to provide that sort of experience for our students, whether it's traveling in country or out of the country, Joe. It is important to the development of a young person, especially a person that maybe hasn't had the opportunity to travel, to see and experience things that's what college is about.
I completely agree, and that was true in my case. I had not traveled much, and being in New York for the first time at age 20, I experienced a whole different setting from the one I lived in Clarksville.
Now, you mentioned Aaron Schmidt as band director. I'm sure there's some other professors along the way that were some of your favorites?
I I don't know how to abbreviate the list, but I will mention some of them. I mentioned earlier uh, Lou Bodine and Dr. Gary, who were my teachers in elementary school, but they were really Austin Peay faculty members. And they continued to be friends long after I had gone. As a matter of fact, when I saw Dr. Gary at a conference when I was retiring from my job at the Tennessee Department of Education, I told him that I was retiring, and he looked at me and said, "Shame on you." He thought I was too young to retire
Mm-hmm.
because he was still at work at Catholic University every day.
Amazing.
And when I came back to graduate school, I arrived about the same time that George and Sharon Mabry arrived as faculty members. And so each of them in varying ways, helped me, encouraged me, and made me aspire to do things a little better, to do things that would make a difference for people. And because they were doing that for me. Dr. Tom Cowan, who was head of the music department at that time, and mentioned Dr. Schmidt, and I could go on with the list of people who really I consider all of them to be mentors in a sense, because they influenced in a real way what I did later as I went on in life.
Well, you've mentioned what people that I think are really part of the Austin Peay legacy. And I think that's, I'm not sure if our students understand that. I want them to understand the people that have been here before and helped establish the programs. And you mentioned the Mabrys, who I still love to be around and hear stories from George when I can. And then also somebody that I always enjoy talking with is Solly Fott.
Solly was my theory teacher when I was 18 and he was only 28. But so we've known each other for a very long time. And in graduate school, as well as in undergraduate school, Solly was a wonderful person to be around. I think you've met him and know that for yourself.
Absolutely.
And we are still in touch and see each other often. And he has been not only a teacher, but a friend all through the years. And those people, as you can see, I was very reluctant to let them go when I graduated. So, we've remained friends for a long time.
And one other note about your time here, which I think I would like to acknowledge, is that you are a charter member of the Theta Tau chapter of Phi Mu Alpha Symphonia fraternity. That's a lot of words there, but I think hopefully I did not butcher that.
You got them all right.
Okay.
And the interesting thing is that initiation of the charter chapter occurred 64 years ago today, May 23rd.
I'll be
1959.
Wow. Well, I'm glad we're doing it today then. Doing this.
So gives me a chance to reminisce.
Yeah. So that must have been one of those times where you get together with a bunch of people that was that in your sophomore year then? or junior year?
Junior year.
Junior year. So you're a junior, and some of these people, I'm sure you had some lasting, long friendships with some other students, and that was just to really seal the deal kind of thing.
It was. I'm still in touch with one other member of the charter group who was a great friend and a great partier when he was at Austin Peay. He ended up at Sewanee, University of the South, and became an Episcopal priest. And he is still, to this day, he still is leading the liturgy in churches, filling in for priests who are on vacation, that sort of thing.
That's quite the history.
Yes.
So Joe, when you graduated and when you got into music education, I'm not sure, but it sounds like you went into Nashville and you started working there.
I did, though it was a little more complicated than that, because when I applied for a job in Nashville and went in for interviews and everything, they said, "We want to hire you, but we do not have a music opening this year." And so I left, started thinking of other possibilities, interviewed for a job in Tampa, Florida, accepted the job.
Oh.
It was early in the summer, but the Nashville schools called and said, "We have a plan we would like to see if you're interested in pursuing." Okay. They said, "We have found that we're going to have a very good job available next year, but we wonder if you would come and join us this year and teach a 6th grade class for that 1 year, and then move into the music job." And that was a little intimidating because I wasn't prepared to teach 6th grade all subjects.
Mm-hmm.
But I really wanted to teach in Nashville, and so I agreed to that. Canceled my job in Florida. Contracts had not been signed. We just had an agreement. So I decided to do that in Nashville, and was glad I did for lots of reasons. One of the reasons is that in that class of 6th graders, they were wonderful students. Every place I taught, the students were great. And in this 6th grade class, there was a young man named Tommy Schulman. And Tommy was very, very bright. I take no credit for what he went on to do. I just hope I didn't hold him back in any way. But back in those days, he was required to have a devotional at the beginning of every school day. And Tommy always read his devotional in Hebrew. He was an amazing gift at doing lots of things and doing them all well. I really had no contact with Tommy after he left. And he went to MBA, Montgomeryville Academy, left the public schools then and went to that private school. And when the movie Dead Poets Society came out, I had a phone call from another teacher and said, "Have you seen Dead Poets Society?" I said, "I'm seeing it this Saturday." She said, "Do you know who wrote it?" And I said, "No." She said, "Your little Tommy Schulman that you always bragged so much about when he was in your 6th grade class." And sure enough, that is true. I have not been in touch with Tommy through the years. He moved to California and has pursued writing and other things, but it was a great thing to know that Tommy, who I could tell had lots of talent, lots of ability, went on to do some pretty great things like Dead Poet Society.
Wow. And, I think that, Joe, over the years and your experience, I'm sure you had lots of little peeks into a window of somebody's young life. And, whether you had that early on or later on within their high school life, or whatever they may have done, you may have just had a little peek into what kind of person that they could become.
There were a lot of those people. The first one that comes to mind is a student, a high school student whose parents I knew very well because his father was a music professor at MTSU. And so he and I felt like we were friends. And he was in band, and I convinced him that he needed to be in choir. And he said, I don't think I'm a singer. And I said, well, come on, let's go in here to the piano and let's see. We did that, and he was a singer. And he did join choir. He auditioned for the chamber choir and was in chamber choir. And I said, Pat, let's have you do a solo and see, maybe you can take it to solo and ensemble festival. Oh, I don't think I can do that. I think you can if you want to. Do you want to? Yeah, I'll do it. So he did, and he went to solo and ensemble festival, and he got a superior rating on his solo. So he remained closely allied with music, but he went on to great things as a voiceover artist. And he is on many, many TV shows, has done exceedingly well in being a voiceover artist.
Well, being nice. And, that's the joy we get to have as educators, is that at some point in time, we get to have a little bit of and we hope that we make a positive influence on a young person. And that's the great thing that's our gift back, is to see them succeed, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. And that was just one of many. I think also of the young lady who was in choir, and she sang very nicely. What my mother would have called, she has a sweet little voice, and she did. But she later decided, a few years later, that she wanted to do more with her voice than she had done. And she ended up, after several other experiments, she ended up with the Philadelphia Academy of Vocal Arts. And pretty soon her picture came out on the cover of one of the opera magazines with the heading, People to Watch. And the next thing I hear, she is singing Queen of the Night at the Met. And she sang a number of times at the Met. She also sang Covent Garden in London. She sang at the Staatsoper in Vienna. She sang around the world. She now is retired and lives here in Nashville, and we're still friends. I see her and her husband quite often.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. And there's so many things we could continue just to focus on and teaching, let me just wrap up the teaching part to say, I'm sure over your period of time, you learned a lot about yourself as a teacher. You learned a lot about the profession at all. That part, before we get to the second part of your career, what kind of things do you think that you learned that you could tell other people about what it's like to be a teacher?
I think I learned that students can do a lot more than they think they can do.
Hmm.
What they need is the encouragement and the inspiration uh, to do better and to go further and to do the best that they can do. I used to have this little speech that I gave regularly saying it's not really hard to be the best because so few people are trying. And that sort of resonated with the high school.
Yeah.
They believed that and they knew that they could do it. We were preparing to participate in Festival of the Nations, an international choral festival. And I assured them that they could do the best, that they could win a gold medal. We had participated previously and had won silver medals, but I wanted, and they wanted, when I talked to them about it, to see if they could do that. Not that winning medals is the aim of things, but achieving what you're capable of is the aim of things. And there are several ends to that story, but one of them is on the morning of the festival, the bass section called me and said, "We're in this room. There are a couple of places that we're not sure about. Could you meet us here?" And I met the bass section, and we had a sectional rehearsal on that morning because they were feeling a little uncertain. And the great thing is, the thing that still makes me smile is that for that session, that day when awards were given, they had the only gold medal of the day. And I had told them, if you should win a gold medal, we still have manners and decorum. I see some of the groups that stand up and scream and yell. We don't do that. So when it happened, one boy in the group was so moved and excited that he stood up and said, "Oh my Lord." And then he looked around and immediately sat down.
He remembered.
He remembered that but it was a very exciting time, and it was a time that I loved. I loved being a choral director.
So at some point during during your career, you're having all this wonderful success, and as I said, lots of wonderful student stories. But you also have the second part to your story, which you are the first director of arts education for the state of Tennessee. How did that happen?
It happened because of the Better Schools program that was a part of Lamar Alexander's term as governor of Tennessee. The program was to reform education, and it seems that we reform education about every other year. But this one was it's supposed to be different, and we had to develop uh, curriculum frameworks and curriculum guides for every school, every subject within each in music for theory and choral and instrumental and in all of the areas of the arts. So when I heard about the job, I saw that maybe that was something that I would like to do, but I had to think about it for a while. And I finally decided to apply. And when the interview process was over, I got a phone call. And it was both intimidating and exciting at the same time, because I was going into something that was really different from what I had done until that point. But with that feeling of intimidation, there also, I could see challenges. And I tried to remember what I think it was one of the great steel magnates, maybe Carnegie, who said, the secret to success is to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you are. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I was able to hire a staff, and I hired terrific people who made me look good and themselves look good.
Well, yeah, you're probably right in that. And a good leader does hire the right people to puts them in the right places. But I would also mention Dr. Sharon Mabry wrote about you that you became one of the country's most influential leaders in arts education, which is, again, teachers don't like to have that those attributions given to them. They just feel that we're part of the process. But, that's saying something about the kind of legacy that you've been involved with here.
Well, I certainly appreciate that kind remark from Sharon. I didn't know that she had said that. I haven't read that letter, but I appreciate it greatly. Because we had a group of people who were really devoted to making visible, audible improvements to the education process. We didn't want this opportunity for us to play an important role in that. And what Sharon's comment probably refers to is the fact that I became involved in lots of the professional associations and was able to have some leadership in those, and did a lot of traveling around the country. I remember waking up in a hotel room and saying, what town am I in? That was probably a little too much traveling, and I needed a break, but it was an opportunity. Let's just put it that way. And we tried to make the opportunity count for something.
Well, I think you're right in the fact that we're not only shaping what was going on within the state of Tennessee, you're starting to have influence in the region and also on the national level, which is we're thankful for, because we certainly need that sort of leadership even today to maintain the level of arts education that's necessary in all these different areas. Because as you said, every once in a while, we have to remind people about the importance of the arts.
Yes, that's a part of our job. We have to explain to them, but sometimes we have to do it in ways beyond words. And we had a student exhibit of their visual art work from students across the state. this was fairly early on in the program, and it was held at Cheekwood here in Nashville. And I always sent invitations to all of our events, to all members of the state legislature. Whether they attended or not would have been nice, but it was not the sole purpose for doing that. It was so they would know that we were here and that we were alive and that we were doing things. And one of the elderly, not then as elderly as I am now, but he was interested in the arts, and he also was interested in supporting his constituents. So he came to the art exhibit, and he called me over as he was looking at a piece of art, and he said, "Are you telling me that these students did this freehand?" And I said, "Yes, sir, they did. They did. They didn't have any black spaces to color in." And he was really a bit startled to know that students could do that. At that very exhibit, there was a beautiful watercolor, leaves and berries, extraordinary. And it had been done by an 8th grader from Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And I encouraged them to stand near their works so at the opening reception so people could talk to them and ask them questions too. And so as we neared the end of it, I said, "I really like your work, and I wonder if you would consider selling it to." And his eyes brightened and he said, "I don't know, let me go ask my dad." He went to his dad, and the dad came over and said, "It's very nice of you, and yes, he can sell it if he wants to, but we don't want him to get things out of proportion." He said, "You cannot pay more than $25. I agreed. The child agreed, and I bought it. I paid $250 to have it framed, and it hangs in my living room to this day.
Oh, wow. And and I think that I try to remind sometimes I think arts educators, people that are music teachers and teaching in any of the arts, every once in a while you kind of get stuck in you're in the forest and you don't see the trees kind of thing, where some people like us that we're experienced, let's just say seasoned, whatever it may be, we have the ability to see a little bit of the bigger picture, that what they're doing is planting the seeds in young people that help them. And you can't ever know who's going to continue to have the art, but each seed that's been planted allows them to have the joy that maybe it will grow into somebody that will do some special things, but if nothing else, it allows them to enjoy that art.
That is well said. The students who I've mentioned, I just pulled out of the air because there were so many others that I could have mentioned that have done equally fine work and are still doing fine work. Some of them here in town, some of them in other places, but they like having something to hold on to and something to, even if they don't, it's not really our goal to make everybody a professional musician or a professional visual artist or a professional actor or a professional dancer, but having the experience of doing it adds a dimension to their lives as they go about what are the choices they have for their livelihood.
So, Joe, did you end up with was the Arts Academy the last thing that you officially then retired from?
That's yes, I guess that could be said. As I said, I had a hard time getting used to being retired. But the Arts Academy came about primarily because we had developed these curricular materials to be used in the classroom, curriculum frameworks, curriculum guides, curriculum frameworks outlining what should be taught, curriculum guides showing possible ways of teaching those things. And then we thought that mailing those to all the school districts was a necessary part of the program, but we needed something to make teachers buy into using them and to be able to ask questions about it. Coming together was an important thing. And we talked about lots of possibilities, but we decided that we wanted to make whatever event we held something that teachers would want to attend, because there was nothing to say that they had to attend it. The great thing was that in the first years, it was completely free to teachers, even including the dorm rooms that they stayed in. But that, of course, gradually goes away. And now there are 350 teachers every summer, and they pay, I don't remember the figure, maybe a $500 tuition to attend. And we decided that there were several things. We wanted to help them improve their skills in teaching in their area. But in addition to that, we wanted them to get to know each other and to get to have this feeling that, you know, we're all a part of the same thing, competition among the arts. We're all in this together. And we decided to have a time in the day, every day, when there was a performance, a musical performance, a theatrical performance, dance, and then added visual art exhibits to that, so that the arts surrounded what they did while they were with us. And then we decided another aspect of it needed to be teachers needed to hear from people who had given their lives to the arts, bright, successful people. And we came up with a segment that we call Musings. And still to this day, musers come in one each day, and they talk to the teachers about how the arts impacted their lives and about how your work will impact the lives of your students. And hearing this from people like Charles Strauss, who wrote Annie and other Broadway shows, and Sheldon Harnick, who wrote the lyrics to Fiddler on the Roof, and Doc Severinsen, people who had meaning and were willing to say to teachers, hey, what you do is among the most important things that happen while they're students. And I think that's the reason that 37 years later, the Academy still goes on each summer. And I can't mention that without mentioning uh, my successor, Frank Bluestein from Memphis, who is executive director of Tennessee Arts Academy now. I have no active role. I show up for musings, for performances, but he has done an extraordinary job of enlarging and coming up with still other ideas. And he also has the benefit of having enormous number of contacts in New York. And he has people who, well, he doesn't know this person, but I know somebody who does know. And we end up having that person attend the academy. And on Wednesday night in the middle of the academy, we have what is called the Bravo Banquet. And it's a sit-down formal dinner. And the entertainment is almost always by some Broadway star that Frank has been able to.
What a great thank you for those teachers.
Oh, it's wonderful. That was one of the things, that the last thing in my list. You anticipated it. We wanted teachers to know that you are appreciated. You are important. We want to be here for you. And they hadn't always heard that.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that caused them to come back time and time again.
Well, they need that support. And I think every once in a while, thanks to when I do things like this, when I do this podcast, and I hear from people like you that say thank you to people that help them along, and I say to teachers, you need to listen to these words because you do impact lives. You may not think that the supportive word you said, the pat on the back, the encouragement, even the discipline that you provided for somebody sent them off in a positive direction.
Sometimes they remember those things and are kind enough to share something with me. Sometimes I don't even remember the particular thing, but one of the things I had for rehearsals was that when it was time to begin the rehearsal, I didn't yell at them. Okay, get in your seats. Get your fold. I said, you know what the bell means, just like I do. So, I'm not going to do that. That's your responsibility to do it. And so they learned to do it. And occasionally they would be excited about something and they would forget. And instead of yelling at them, I would just go in my office and close the door. And in about 20 seconds, there would be, we're ready. Out and begin. So I had wonderful experiences with the students in all of the schools where I taught.
Well, that's awesome. The fact that you're willing not only to share that with other teachers, but also to share that with our stories today. Joe, the last thing that we always like to ask is what kind of recommendations do you have for an Austin Peay student that might be in music education major?
I think that there are many advantages, partly because of the size of the school, because when there are 800 music majors, one might not get to do all of the things that they can do when there are fewer music majors. The other thing I would say is because of the quality of instruction that they get. There are people teaching at Austin Peay who could be teaching many other larger institutions, but they are at Austin Peay because they chose to be. And I think you're a good example of that. You have come to Austin Peay because you wanted to.
That's right.
And so I think that having access to expertise among the faculty, community among the students, knowing people, it's good to know people. And yeah, so those things I think are big pluses for smaller institutions, but for Austin Peay in particular.
That's terrific, Joe. And as I said, not only I thank you for your time and your stories, but let me just end with this. Did you ever think, looking back now, you've had some time to reflect on going back to little Joe in the classes, that the demonstration school, that you could say, you're going to have one heck of a time here, that you're going to really have such a big influence on so many different things? Are you a little bit amazed at sometimes the life that you've had?
Absolutely flabbergasted, because it's not something that you can plan, and things happen.
Yeah.
And you move from one thing to another, and that gives the opportunity to do the next thing that you're going to do. And no, I would never have thought of having such opportunities as I've been given. And I'm eternally grateful for those opportunities.
Well, we're certainly proud of you here at Austin Peay, Joe.
Thank you very much, Dean.
And thanks to all our viewers and listeners out there for checking out the podcast. We hope that you will join us again as we continue to profile some of the outstanding alumni we have here in the College of Arts and Letters at Austin Peay State University. So until next time, stay safe, take care, and God bless.